Welcome back. And this is your Haunted Holidays Valentine's Day special. Consider this me and Lindsay's gift to you in the event that you don't have a date, you didn't get flowers. It's probably the same for me, probably Lindsay, I'm guessing.
For sure.
So don't feel bad. We're all in the same boat today if you just don't have anything to do. Or maybe you do have a date and you're listening to this tomorrow or the next day or next week. But we have a great Valentine's Day story for you. It goes back a really long time ago, and it's actually considered the oldest operating inn in the USA. It is a great love story, kind of. It's also a little bit morbid and weird. But if you don't have a date, this might be a place you can get lucky. You'll learn about that here in a little bit. This is your haunted holiday at Longfellow's Wayside Inn in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Let's get right into this one, Lindsay. This is going to be probably a shorter episode than most of our episodes, but it is a very good story on the Valentine's Day theme, I gotta say.
Okay, awesome. And I know you said it was a little bit morbid, but that's kind of what this show's all about, right?
Absolutely. It's not going to be haunted if there's not some messed up story behind it, right? And I'm not a huge Valentine's Day fan anyway, so I'm all about the tragedy on this day, to be honest with you. Let's get right into it, Lindsay. This place was built all the way back in 1716 by David Howe, and it was originally called Howe's Tavern. And I just hear that year 1716 and I think, whoa, that is way older than a lot of the places that we've covered so far. And I think a lot of that is because we talk a lot about the South. You live in the South, I live in the Midwest, and I think those places are so old. But getting into Massachusetts, that's like the real old buildings.
Yeah, no kidding. That's before the Revolution. I don't know if I've ever... Well, the only other place I can think maybe might be older would be the old Pirate House in Savannah, but I don't know. I'd have to Google that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's older buildings, no doubt, but this is an old one for our standards, I think. So this was built in 1716. How it did get its name, the Longfellow's Wayside Inn, is it was actually visited in 1862 by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Do you have any idea who that is, Lindsay?
Not a clue.
So Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is actually pretty famous in history. He was really inspired by the tavern and the people there and the hospitality. And he wrote a series of poems that he titled The Tales of the Wayside Inn. And it was loosely based on Howe's Tavern at the time. And that series of poems actually included The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So everybody is familiar with that poem. And that was actually based on the tavern too, oddly enough. So at some point in time after those series of poems were written, the tavern actually changed hands and another person bought it, and they decided they wanted to capitalize off the fame of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow and decided to rename it the Longfellow's Wayside Inn. But let's go back. Let's go back a little ways before Mr. Wadsworth Longfellow ever visited. And there was a woman named Jerusha Howe, and she was actually born in 1797, and she was the sister of one of the prior owners. And she was considered quite beautiful. They thought she was one of the most beautiful women in the town. And when she was quite young, a young Englishman came into town and actually stayed at the tavern. And she met him and just immediately fell, head over heels for this English guy. I mean, we do love an accent, don't we? It's pretty easy to do. So she falls in love with him, and he had to go back. So apparently he was a sailor, and he needed to go back to England, but they had made a promise that they would, never meet somebody else or move on. He was going to return for her. And guess what? He never did return.
Why am I not shocked by this? They made a pact.
I know. So they made a pact. He never returns, but she is completely loyal. And she is certain that this English guy is gonna come back for her. And she actually waits her entire life for him to return and ends up dying at the age of 45, still waiting for him in the year of 1842.
Oh my goodness. That is just so sad. But, we didn't have any means of communication. Do we know what happened to him? Do we have any history on him?
That's a great question. There is no history on him. Like, I don't even have his name. They say, mail back in those days was pretty unreliable. Like, so maybe he died when he was trying to sail back to England. Maybe he tried to write her, but he couldn't. But she waited quite a long time. Like, I feel like if he tried to get a hold of her, I mean, granted, it's much harder back then to do. It's not like sending a text message. He probably could have accomplished it. But guess what? He was probably just shady. I consider this because the reality is Jerusha, let's be real, everybody. We know what this show is about. She's going to come back as a ghost. I wonder if this is where the term ghosted came from, because this is like the ultimate ghosted. She just up and left, and then she turned into a ghost.
Whoa. She totally got ghosted. Now, here, I'm a pessimist. I made the joke like, oh yeah, shocker. Right? He never came back after this supposed pact, but who knows? Maybe something tragic did happen to him. Like, I'd almost like to think that just for her sake.
But we're not as naive, I think, as, young Jerusha Howe was at the time, right? This is like the 1700s. Like, she thought this guy was for real coming back for her. And she was ghosted and now is a ghost.
So do we know? So she only was 45. What happened to Jerusha? Do we know how she died?
She died of natural causes, I believe.
How is that even possible?
People didn't get
She was 45.
People didn't get that old back in the day, Lindsay. This is the 1700s. You get ill, like, you're a goner, man. They don't have antibiotics.
Yeah.
You're a goner. I mean,
I was just watching this show on Netflix called Pandemic. It's this new show that came out. And maybe she got the flu.
Right.
I mean, deadly.
It could have been anything for all we know. I mean, the reality is I'm surprised anybody could live to the age of 45 back then, honestly, because I have gotten sick before. Like, I had appendicitis a few years ago. If I lived back when Jerusha did, I would have been dead. Like, there ain't no cure for that back then.
It's horrible.
You're right. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's completely free, and this is how I actually started my podcast. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. I'm actually using my iPad. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Take a moment to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So to this day, Jerusha is apparently brokenhearted and still at the Longfellow's Wayside Inn. And she's apparently, I don't know if she's still looking for this young Englishman, but back in her real life, she was very loyal and waiting for him. But apparently she's given that up. She's not about loyalty anymore in the afterlife. If you are a man and you go to this inn and you stay in certain rooms within it, she is very likely to make a pass at you.
Really?
You might get lucky. I don't know if you want to get lucky by a ghost, but it's totally possible. So next year, if you guys are listening to this and you know you're not going to have a date, hey, this Longfellow's Wayside Inn might be a stop that you'd like to partake in.
What?
Some weirdos into it.
What would you say? She makes a pass at you. What do you mean when she makes a pass at you? What kind of experiences are people actually having?
So for example, if you're a man, so we would not be able to have this experience, as from what I understand. She does not approach women. So if you're a man and you're laying in bed there, and this is, by the way, in rooms 9 is the primary one, and that was her bedroom when she lived in the tavern, and then room 10 was her sewing room. So she spent a lot of time in both of those rooms. And if you are a man laying in bed there, apparently she is known to actually crawl into bed with you, sometimes wrap her arms around you. You'll feel an arm come across you. You'll turn around and you may actually see her laying there next to you and then disappear. So that's one thing she might do.
Wow. That would be terrifying.
It would be terrifying. But the other thing that she does is she will actually stick her hands where the sun don't shine.
Really?
Yeah. She'll actually do some like business down there.
She'll go downstairs, huh?
Yep. She goes downstairs. So interesting.
This is the first time I've ever heard of anything like this.
Well,
This is new.
I don't know anything about it, but isn't there like incubus and succubus or something like that? Where like the incubus.
Okay, I've heard about this.
Incubus is like a male demon or something that tries to sleep with people, and then succubus is the woman demon, but I don't know what that exactly means. Like, I think there's a lot of folklore into those, and like I'm definitely not an expert on it. That's about the extent of my knowledge on it. I wonder if she'd be considered like a succubus, like trying to sleep.
No, because she's not a demon. I think that is more like evil, like gets really much worse than a little downstairs action.
True. Yeah, that's true. She's not a demon. She's just looking for love. You know, she's brokenhearted and she said, you know what? This jerk ghosted me. I'm going to like have fun all over town. Well, at least in rooms 9 and 10.
I was going to say just at the Wayside Inn.
Just at the Wayside Inn. So those are the main things that she does. She will also like tickle men's feet sometimes. You'll actually very commonly, I guess, actually see her standing in the corner of the room and then just slowly disappear. So you'll actually see sometimes a full-bodied apparition of Jerusha in the rooms. She's also, you may hear sad piano music. So she's clearly like sad. And apparently her favorite perfume was like a citrus smelling perfume, and you can very often smell that. So if you go here, you want to, listen for that piano music, smell to see if you get some sort of, citrusy scent. She's also known for actually pulling sheets right off of the bed. And a lot of times, Lindsay, this happens when the guy's like wife or girlfriend is actually in the bed with them, which I think makes it even weirder. They're not like there by themselves. Whoa. Yeah.
That would be terrifying. It sounds like she's extremely active, and I will say just to see a full-figured apparition, which it sounds like happens periodically here, is so rare to actually see something like that.
It is. And I think, I think a ghost that like wants to do it with you is probably pretty rare too. I haven't heard of much of that, although maybe it's more common than we think. I don't know.
Could be.
Interesting. So if you want to stay at the Longfellow's Wayside Inn, it is a bed and breakfast. So it typically includes breakfast. They have a really nice restaurant at the inn where a lot of people book like fancy dinners for Valentine's Day and stuff like that. It looks really nice and cozy and very like romantic like setting, which very much fits into our episode tonight. The rooms go for between $170 to $190 a night, but they don't look like super fancy rooms. Like, it is the original inn. It doesn't look run down or anything either by that means, but it looks pretty basic. There's a comfortable bed. The actual rooms themselves don't look as fancy as like the dining hall, for example. If you do want to book rooms 9 and 10, the website for the inn does specify try to book in advance. Try to get those rooms as far in advance as you can because they do book up quickly. Now, what I will say, when I went to the website, they didn't really mention anything on the hotel's website about the haunting, but it does just say, if you want to book famous rooms 9 and 10, something like that, be sure to book them quick. But it doesn't say if you want to go, into Jerusha's room or anything like that. And in fact, the whole story of Jerusha, I wasn't even able to find on their website, even though they have a whole history page that talks about like how it got its name, when it was built. It doesn't really tell that love story on the website itself, which I thought was kind of interesting because they are really known for this story. I really hope we were able to make everybody's Valentine's Day extra special today with this tragic yet bizarre love story at the Longfellow's Wayside Inn. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on all social media. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, and a Twitter page. So be sure to follow us there as well. And we look forward to our next episode, which will still be on Sunday. Be sure to tune into that. And thank you so much for listening.